Hi everyone, it's HedgieCleric, and welcome to another episode of Craft Services, where we usually do a stitch and bitch with various game designers. This one's going to be a little bit different. We have a lovely panel of guests with us today. First of all, we have Matthew Montalto, who's one of the contributing writers for the MORRA RPG, and a fantastic individual around.
Oh, thank you.
We have Rachel Judd, who is also a contributing writer for the MORRA RPG and has a phenomenal list of credits to her name, doing fantastic things, especially on the Vorpal Tales Twitch. And as a special guest today for us for World Goth Day, we have DJ Dante Verde, a goth DJ based out of the San Francisco Bay Area.
Thank you for having me.
So before we go into deeply into the agenda for today, oh god, I'm starting to sound like my character from Boardroom Armageddon, where I'm being very like corporate-y. Like I'm forgetting how to people. This is what the pandemic does to you people. Anyway, before we go too deeply into our project today, I want to kind of want to go around the table and kind of ask everybody kind of what their experience is specifically with the goth genre, either from gothic literature all the way out to the goth club scene now and the goth subculture. How you got exposed to it, what is your favorite part of it, and what you kind of hope will come out of today and where we go with it. Let's go ahead and start with Rachel.
Okay, so hello, my name is Rachel. I started with Goth as a teenager in the 90s. Like many teenagers in the 90s, getting started with Vampire the Masquerade. I have written games, run games, sort of in the Goth genre. I have a degree in English with an emphasis on Victorian literature. Uh, Tons of nights spent at goth clubs. I'm probably missing stuff, but there you go.
That's fair. Matt, how about you?
Uh, I, I think I'm more goth adjacent and fanboy of goth. All the people that I looked up to when I was a teenager, they were all goth, and it's always been something where they were the people who got to express themselves the way that I kind of wanted to when I was that age. And now that I'm older and I can like do cosplay and run around and play vampire and other World of Darkness type settings, I can experiment like I would have liked to have when I was younger.
That's awesome. And no time like the present, for real. Like this is like the best time to do stuff like that. Um and next, with the obvious ringer in the group, Dante.
God, I've been goth or goth adjacent for 25 years now. Mostly I got started just really kind of wandering around the various groups, some gaming, some of the witchy groups in Chicago. I too used gaming as a gateway drug because, you got to do that. And I've got into DJing about 15 years ago now. So I've been going on that. I've always been sort of, if not directly into it, definitely adjacent to it, either through the witchy pagan crowds, the horror crowds, etc.
Very cool. As for me, my my journey with being a goth started in about the mid 90s, and I was about 10 years old. Very first R-rated movie I ever got to go see with my mom, by the way, was Interview with the Vampire.
Oh,
I saw the trailers. I loved the aesthetic. I loved everything about it. And little baby bat me, who didn't know she was a baby bat yet, said, "Mom, can I go see this?" And my mom went with me, and that's basically when an obsession with vampires started. Which then led me to even know what the Vampire the Masquerade was when I started in college, and somebody who was trying to get my attention in a romantic sense asked me if I knew what Vampire the Masquerade was. speaking as one theater kid to another. And when I did, apparently that was enough for him to invite me to my first LARP. But prior to all that, in high school, I got like the Metropolis record samplers from Hot Topic. I did far more shopping there than my mother would have liked. I bought a lot of black clothes. And I really made no bones about the fact that I liked it spooky. When I graduated college, I started getting more involved in the Bay Area goth scene, specifically going to clubs like The Box, Death Guild, House of Nox, and a whole bunch of other events in the area. And that's actually, clubbing has been one of the things that I've really missed during the pandemic a lot. I miss going out there and shaking tail. But on this World Goth Day, we get to bring a little bit of it back to our homes. And specifically, since this is primarily gaming and crafting, today we're actually going to be making something on screen with all of you. So, all of us, with the exception of Dante, but he lives with me, so he's probably heard me talking about things and bouncing ideas off the walls as I'm writing anyway. We're working with the MORRA Cinematic Gaming System, which is currently on Kickstarter. A lot of us have been working on it through Mighty Narwhal Productions. And Rachel just pulled her mic forward, so she probably has something to say about it.
Oh, no, that was me just moving my hand in a very tiny workspace. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. I just wanted to make sure that you had, if you wanted to chime in with something, that you could. So one of the awesome things about MORRA is the rule set is very versatile and allows for a variety of genres or settings where you can actually set the game you want to play. The book itself on Kickstarter is coming out with 3. Mystical Rome. There's a probably now a limited series running here on HedgieCleric, probably once a month, because that's what scheduling can work out with. Rachel just did a fantastic run of Punching Nazis over on Vorpal Tales. And later on tonight, Matthew's going to be running The Mark of Zorro, which is one of our genres coming up, specifically in conjunction with Zorro, the actual licensed property.
Yes.
So if you have a thing for California history and swashbuckling, that's the genre for you. So definitely go check that out later tonight. Matt will be giving us details at the end of this stream. So one of the things that I found out that MORRA sorely lacked is an explicitly gothic genre. We have Ravenswood Academy, which goes through with the wizard school and has some Lovecraftian themes, but it's not explicitly meant to be dark and spooky and dealing with the phantasmagoria that you usually see involving the gothic subculture and the gothic aesthetic. So that's what I wanted to build here today. And what better day to do it than World Goth Day? So
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. So there are a few different steps that we need to kind of go through. This is basically going to be a writer's room where we all get together, we start talking about different things that appeal to us about either Gothic literature or the Gothic subculture, and kind of distill those ideas into a pitch for some sort of setting that we would want to actually build using the MORRA engine. Rachel and I definitely have the Gothic literature piece of it on lock. Oh, hey, we just got some... Oh, my goodness. We just got a whole bunch of gift subs in the chat. Thank you, Alex. Morning Kill. That's fantastic. Oh my gosh, so many of you. It's so great. And Matt, you've got some fanboys in the chat. All right, already. Oh, thank you, Jeff. Anyway, we are going to be building a goth genre today for MORRA. I took sufficient courses. I actually took a specific course in college. It was around Gothic literature and sexuality, specifically, over at UC Riverside. So I think Rachel and I may have the literature piece on lock. Matt, you definitely have some ideas based on, some of the things that we've already seen in kind of the gaming space and where we could potentially
Mhm.
differentiate. And Dante, you're literally immersed in this stuff, and you can either fact check us or even, use some of your film buff uh, brain trickery to make sure that we've got this right.
Oh, I didn't know if I mentioned, but for a while I was a film student, so
Mm,
a lot of mood and general terminology I can definitely contribute.
absolutely. One of the beautiful things about the MORRA book is that a lot of what's in there specifically is framed in the language of movies, especially a lot of our safety mechanics. When you tell someone that's not in my contract, that very clearly says, don't do that. And it's a lot easier for some folks to understand if they even if they haven't been to other games that have similar mechanics. Anyways, I'm getting completely off track because I gotta admit I'm kind of nervous. I'm gonna drink some water. Maybe that will help.
You're doing great.
Drink.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Yes. And remember, because Twitch said so, this is water.
Yes, I just have glowy water.
Mm-hmm.
I know all week I've been kind of brainstorming like how to create a gothic genre that we haven't maybe already seen before, and it's something that's very much in vogue right now with the resurgence of vampire, and also with the recent release of some more gothic themed fantasy settings that have come out.
Yeah, Ravenloft.
Yes.
Let's not dance
Uh,
around it. The new Ravenloft book came out. It is fantastic. I actually
oh,
know quite a few people who worked on that, and they're delightful people. And I'm actually really excited to see their names on it because they're the people that I absolutely would trust with the material.
it was such a pleasure to read. It was
Ooh.
so well put together. It's a great book.
Right.
I,
So,
I I did cut my teeth on Ravenloft back in the day, and to this day, whenever anyone describes mist, I want to leave.
so goth is a fairly broad option here. There's a lot of different ways we could go. We could go a little bit more, you know, we could go potentially more Shelley, or we could go potentially more Alchemy Mondays by Voltaire. We could take it a lot of different ways. We could basically use some of the modern Gothic aesthetic to potentially inform things, but also maybe have something a little bit more lighthearted. Or we could really dive in deep with some of the spooky elements that come into being goth. Not just the look, but the actual feel of
Yeah.
it too. So Matt, you've been talking about some of the ideas that you had. Want to share with some of what you've been thinking?
So something that I was thinking of, and immediately I was brainstorming this, I was thinking about like this picture came into my mind of I want to say it was probably from one of the Palladium games, or maybe it was from one of the original World of Darkness settings, but it was this picture of a goth punk woman, and she was having like a psychic power like surge in her brain, and she's like doing a psychic scream.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking about how like psionics and psychic powers maybe could blend in really well with like a more the goth aesthetic, where we might have, empathy and mediumship and pyrokinesis, where we're maybe not going down the road of magic, which is a bit more familiar with the way that goth might go with when we have like more witchy things, but we're still in that genre of something that is spooky and powerful, and also empowering as well.
That's interesting. What do you think, Rachel?
I really like that. I really like the idea of delving into uh psychic experiences and psionics, because I feel like part of the goth aesthetic is sort of looking at the world as it is and like seeing clearly through all the bullshit that people try to sell you and be like, that's bullshit. So I feel that dovetails really well with my take on that aspect of modern goth culture.
Dante, what are your thoughts?
I had a really hard time coming up ideas for a gothic themed game while still separating it from magic. Maybe because of my own background, but everything is this communal experience of this subculture, seeing through, like Rachel said, seeing through the lie, the shadow of it. And honestly, that's been a powerful theme in movies, literature, what have you, for at least the last 25 years, definitely longer. For me, I was latching on the idea of, maybe it's because I go with the club scene, the idea of some kind of communal energy or some sort of communal some sort of communication, nonverbal communication through members of the community, be it through shadows, music, some sort of communal experience, because that's very much what a lot of my artwork takes the form of. So that was the first thing I latched onto.
Okay.
Obviously, I leaned more toward the modern aesthetic than the historical one. I do have some literary background, but nowhere near probably the other three of you. So I tend to latch more on the modern trappings myself.
And that's absolutely fair. And I think there's definitely a way to marry these. I do like the idea of psionics and like kind of some of the medium aspects, especially since ghosts factor in pretty heavily into a lot of Gothic literature. So we could
Yeah, I mean,
potentially, yes?
yeah, so as far as Gothic literature goes, like we don't have to just like directly incorporate Frankenstein or Wuthering Heights or books like that, but there are certain unifying principles that make Gothic literature Gothic, and so like part of it is like the setting is somewhere really isolated. So like Wuthering Heights is on this moor in the Scottish Highlands, which most readers would have thought as being impossibly far away. Um, so there's that sense of isolation. There's that sense of focus on what people are feeling, like, and especially like leaning into like aloneness, because Frankenstein is all about being alone
Hmm.
and being misunderstood. And so I think if we can harness those tropes and those elements of the building blocks of Gothic literature, we could still make a very modern Gothic setting. So, like, you could still have, the club that is sort of where everybody goes to relax and recharge and reconnect with their community. Uh, but it's still like, maybe it's a basement in the middle of town and it's difficult to get to, and you've got to know someone who knows someone to get in.
Mhm.
That's possible. We have a lot of really good ideas here. And we could definitely color it with a few different aspects. I mean, we'd absolutely go a little bit more kind of more English Gothic if we want to go, the little isolated town on the moors, or we could go Southern Gothic, which kind of more along the lines of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, really kind of that more sultry, little bit of a grit to it. Um,
Or for a more modern example, the earlier seasons of Supernatural, it very much had that
mhm,
Southern Gothic back roads kind of Gothic vibe.
mhm. Yeah. So, and when you're translating this into a modern setting, those kind of small towns or those out of the way places, or that lake house or what have you, that's how we're going to be getting away from everybody. The world is way more connected than it used to be, so it actually takes a lot of effort to just kind of get away.
Yeah. Well, another element of Gothic literature has to do with secrets,
Hmm.
because especially in Southern Gothic, everybody's got their own secret, and
Hmm.
that is what is driving them apart from each other. Because, like, yeah, you could go text your estranged cousin whom you miss very much, but because of these secrets, you're not going to.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair.
To dovetail off that, I really do think that's why a lot of modern horror and goth stories say that this magic or this power or this MacGuffin or what have you interferes with technology. It takes away, I mean, one of the big things I see in a lot of media films, books, what have you, is that whatever is happening out there interferes with tech. It takes away the safety net of technology, and I think that's a good trope to have because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise you have the problem that Hitchcock had of why don't they just call the cops? Because it's boring. But it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, but it's boring.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that struggle there.
That makes a lot of sense. So, what I'm hearing is potentially more of like kind of have a small town vibe to it, but with a very invested subculture. Oh, hydrate.
Gotta spend the bits on something.
Hey, that works. I'm working on getting that fleshed out. I actually just submitted my first emoji too.
Nice.
So, we've
I
got. Yes?
I was actually my brain is kind of racing with the. You mentioned doing something a little bit lighter thematically,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like oh god, there is not enough goth comedy or dark comedy out there, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, I know a lot of people seem to be taking their more traditionally like gothic slash punk options and kind of turning it more a little towards the comedy aspect, specifically like kind of going the route of like what we do in the shadows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I absolutely am down with playing with that just because one of the big themes that frequently comes up in gothic literature and modern gothic subculture is death. And the idea of, being fascinated with the idea but not being quite ready for it. It's like the there's tinges of nihilism if you get too deep into it, but at the same time, it's also, laughing with death as if it's an old friend.
That's why Burton had a career so early on so much.
There you go.
Hey, I was one of those who actually got to see Beetlejuice in theaters, and I think that might have affected me at a young age.
Well, and the interesting thing about MORRA is that we can have things like supernatural stuff uh, that delves into the more like phantasmagorical and the fantastic, or we can go more like a science-y route, and we can do something like Edward Scissorhands, where or Frankenstein, where we have a creature that was built by science,
Mm-hmm.
and we can explore what that character would be like. And Mora allows for that because it's a little bit of a one size fits all type game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's got a lot
Rachel.
of. Sorry, go ahead.
So no, you go ahead.
Yeah, it's got a lot of different parts where you could basically do a lot of different things with it, but there's also enough room to play around and add to it and make it your own as well, which is one of the things I personally love about it. Sorry, what was that? So, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. What Rachel mentioned the idea of isolation and isolation being a prevalent theme and pretty much a vast majority of gothic media. Um, you mentioned also doing something in a small town section. I think one of the things we want to latch onto is we have this isolation. If it's psychological isolation, then I think we'd want to be in a more urban or densely populated area, and that isolation occurs psychologically or sociologically. If you want something a little more small town, physically isolated, then that's going to have a whole different set of themes to it.
Hmm.
So just something to think about when you're throwing your story ideas out there.
Yeah.
I think there's a way to do both. If you've read Lost Souls by Poppy Z. Brite, I think that
Oh,
perfectly marries both of those themes.
That was
Yeah, I know,
exactly
it's
where my brain was
fantastic.
going.
It's a wonderful book.
That was one of my
I
favorite books growing up. Like little 15-year-old me was absolutely in love with that book.
I didn't finish it to my eternal shame. I don't have it.
I might I might have it in storage. We know if we need to shake down for that, we can do that after the stream. So, one of the things we could do with this is we could absolutely kind of have that. We could potentially do it like a small town somewhere in a part of the country that, is underrepresented, kind of almost like a bastion for outsiders in a lot of ways, but also kind of has, on the surface, it's just, your regular blink and you'll miss it kind of town. And I do like the idea of kind of like potentially like psionics or mediumship or something like that, just because where this town is located, it could just be very close to like where the veil is particularly between worlds is particularly thin, or there could be some sort of, clandestine research facility where if, people accidentally wander in and the day they wander out and suddenly they have a little bit more to them, like potentially like psionic powers, the ability to see ghosts, etc. So we could potentially do that and have a couple of different sources for it, which will help us get into archetypes later.
Mm-hmm.
How's everybody feel about that? Because for this, I want to have the like best idea wins sort of thing. So if like something doesn't work, we don't have to go that route.
I like this idea. I like where it's going.
Okay. Let me go ahead and take some notes, and then I'm actually going to share those notes on the screen just so people can kind of see it for a little bit. And then as we continue, I'll be swapping back and forth between seeing all our lovely faces and what we've written down so far.
So are we wanting... Oh, go ahead.
I do feel like there's not enough mad science goth out there anymore. I mean, it seems to be the
absolutely do that, yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be more the purview of the more steampunk stories.
Mm-hmm.
The mad science and adventure sort of thing, as opposed to the mad science and excuse me while I dig somebody up so I can use their parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the small town is in some sort of metaphysically interesting place.
Yeah.
Which prompts a clandestine research facility. There's already naturally occurring various mediums and psychics and what have you. But then when this organization, this sinister sciencey organization comes in, it kind of crops up a little bit more. And then because it's going to be pretty rare to have this come up, I mean, it's not going to be everybody in the town is psychics. It's definitely going to have a idea of scarcity around it. As people realize that they have this, there's a place they know they can go to, not only as a safe haven, but also as a way to kind of come together and really understand what they can do, either control it or improve what they can do.
Well, so one idea could be, because this is going to be a role-playing game, so it's going to be, like 3 to 7 people on average. You're the only 3 to 7 people in the town who can see what's really going on. Like, you're the only people who are this special and this empowered. Because goth is still it's still very much a subculture.
Absolutely.
And so
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it reminds me a little bit of the design behind Tales from the Loop, where you are playing children, elementary school children, and you are really like the only people who understand what's going on and the only people who can get things done.
With that in mind, I think it also could be potentially interesting for when we get into archetypes to not only have, a lot of these specifically psychic people or people with, various, telekinesis or what have you, specifically around that. I think it also could be potentially interesting to have some character archetypes that don't necessarily have those powers, but are at least adjacent to it and could potentially act as a supporting mechanism. Like, the bartender. Like, we could seriously have bartender as an archetype. I'm not kidding.
So what if this small town is the maybe it's like a company town, and it is a very structured place, kind of like maybe like a 1950s wannabe type type place where everything is very regimented.
Mhm.
Like everyone's lawn is perfectly cut. The houses are perfect clones of one another, which then we then have the contrast of our goth characters against this
Mhm.
cookie cutter world that is artificial, where then our heroes, by virtue of the fact that they are a part of the subculture, like they are like the more realistic type people, as well as the other people in the town who have woken up as well, like our bartender, for instance, um, and they're abnormal when the rest of the town views them. So it's this it's very, I guess it's very punk in some
Mhm.
ways, where
Yeah.
we have the normalcy and of
Mhm.
like the boring world versus our
Mhm.
heroes,
I
and
mean,
the want to correct our heroes.
a lot of goths came out of suburbia, so I
Mhm.
really love this piece of world building.
Yeah. Another thing that
Stepford.
I think I want to kind of build on this a little bit, if you don't mind, but I like the idea of a company town. I like the idea of the company town having its peak 20 years ago. So it's kind of starting to, people are still holding on to that dream, but it's starting to fray at the edges. And then a lot of the people who are, especially like the main cast members who are going to be playing around the table, are the ones who have basically figured out, no, this dream is dead. There's all this other craziness going on, and this research facility would be run by that company because they're
Yeah,
desperately trying to remain relevant. And then they don't know that they're creating something they don't even understand. I like it.
yeah.
Okay.
Nothing scarier than a villain desperately trying to hold on to a past.
All
Hmm.
right. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch screens real quick and move some things around because I oh
And
nope.
sorry, Matthew. One of the nice things about what you mentioned of having that cookie cutter existence is some of the best things that are scary, like vampire, like
Mm-hmm.
like that weird sort of Stepford suburb,
Mm-hmm.
is the fear of indoctrination.
Right.
They're not
Okay.
going to destroy you; they're going to make you like them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is probably going to be so like let's take a look at media length. Do we want this to necessarily be like more of like a TV series, or do you think it would just be kind of like a movie? Because I think it has potential for both, but I want to hear your input on this.
Um, I tend, given the concept is good, but a lot of times a concept like that either has to evolve or it outstays its welcome.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably go for movie length
Okay.
because I think one of the major drawbacks to a hidden world,
Mm-hmm.
it's hidden world stories often fall victim to escalation sickness.
Mm-hmm.
It's a how do people not notice this anymore, and it tends to break break disbelief for suspension of disbelief for a lot of people of there is a monster running through the cornfields. Somebody should have noticed this by now.
Yeah,
So I
that's
mean,
fair.
I think a fixed length story would probably lend itself to this theme a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not only that, but when you're dealing with a potentially a more gothic themed story, is sometimes it's not about winning. Sometimes the best stories told are losing battles.
That
I know
absolutely
that's
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. I know that's a downer, but it can also be really compelling stories.
Okay. So who would be the target audience for something like this? Obviously goths.
Yeah.
Yeah,
um, oh, wait, no. Why? Damn it, computer! I
you
was
know,
typing over here.
I kind of see this as having like a lot of potential in the teen audience because that's when like you really
Mm-hmm.
first discover goth and come
Oh
into it.
yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking of like a coming of age story.
Mm-hmm. And let's be real, the clandestine research facility with something strange happening is not necessarily a new is not necessarily new territory. I mean, if any of y'all watched Alex Mack back in the day, I'm gonna date myself here.
I was actually too old for Alex Mack.
I loved
Oh.
that show.
But yeah, there's
Mhm.
more than a few. In fact, one of the more fun goth movies that I know of is essentially, spoiler warning, is an entire world built on top of a laboratory, and
Mhm.
that's Dark City.
Mhm.
Ooh.
Absolutely. Um. Yeah, and like the idea of like a company town with something sinister on it is absolutely. It's not original, but we don't give a shit.
No.
If this
Yeah.
is about playing something that is going to resonate with us and that we're going to have fun with. And like that's one of the beautiful things about being a goth.
Yeah.
There may be things that have been done before, but who gives a shit? We're having fun with it and we're doing what we love until we die.
Of course.
And there we go.
In terms of your target audience, though, I mean, you have a pretty wide berth on this because, like Rachel was saying, your teen audience is just starting to figure out the world, and that's a great coming of age story. You got your folks in their 20s and early 30s who are figuring out exactly how much of what they grew up with was kind of
Mm-hmm.
BS.
Yeah. I also put down 90s nostalgia seekers because, well,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like you
I
do.
I was about to say I call an airstrike on my own location. I understand. And yes,
I
I
am at your
understand.
location.
I know you are.
Mm,
But yeah,
Uh,
so like there's definitely a lot of different places we can go with it. And yeah, definitely like this could be like a movie or maybe a series of movies because if we try to go too deep into this with escalating, too deeply, it could definitely kill the show. I mean, look at Supernatural. It went 14 seasons and it just kept on getting bigger and bigger and bigger in scope that these particular enemies that Sam and Dean were fighting. We also saw
yeah.
this with shows like Eureka. I say specifically because I know we're rewatching it at home right now, Dante.
I mean, we could always
And
take a
Warehouse
very
13. We actually just finished that one up too.
I mean, we could always take an anthology view, like the way American Horror Story does it.
We could, yeah.
I always refer to American Horror Story as the goth version of The Wire.
Yeah.
Depending on what season you watch, yeah, no, absolutely. Because there are definitely seasons of American Horror Story I have absolutely no interest in, and then one comes up and I'm like, I have to binge it all right now.
The hotel one was really good.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. I got a frog in my throat. Anyway,
Choking on a little bit of irony there, dear.
shut it. So I think we kind of nailed down like kind of what our target audience would be.
mm-hmm.
What would we want this to be rated? Like, let's go with just general MPAA ratings here. G, PG, PG-13, R. I don't think this is going to go too deeply into NC-17 territory, but
Yeah, I think I'm definitely thinking PG-13 or R.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be
PG-13.
dealing with some pretty dark themes. I just, it's just a question of how deep are we going to go with those? Like, how gory is it going to get? Like, do we want to keep it more psychological horror where it does show up? Do we want to, like, basically, how many times do we want to let our characters say fuck? And there's my one fuck for the stream. Everybody gets one.
Did you just use
Cheers.
all of ours, or do we
No,
each
just
get one?
mine. Each one, every so I have a couple of rules on here. As I tell everybody who comes on that we keep it PG-13. Everybody gets one F-bomb, and then that's it. I mean, it's a less rules, more guidelines. Mostly because I'm planning a swear jar for a future feature, and if somebody uses more than they're allotted, it'll go in the swear jar, and then there may be charity donations involved. So it'll
Nice.
it'll get really interesting if I'm working on a craft project that is a pain in my ass, and I keep poking myself. It's like, God, do it, while I'm
No,
interviewing someone. I'm looking
have
forward to
people
it.
have people do a bits contribution, and you don't allow yourself to curse until you get enough bits. The reverse swear jar.
That's terrifying. I may steal it outright. Just fair warning.
You're welcome. Given my thought, I would probably go PG-13 only because I feel the restraint of a PG-13 rating will force us to get more inventive.
That's fair.
I like that.
I don't know if this guy's a squeaky chair.
That's me. Sorry, I had to shift a little bit.
Wiggle your butt. Shake tail.
But I feel like a lot of shows out there got really inventive because they had to within the restraint. Granted, I want everybody to be able to express themselves however they want, but like any good sandbox, if you don't know where the walls are, you don't know how much to fill.
Exactly.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. So, that was probably the easiest part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And now we go into budget. In the MORRA system, there are a few different budgets out there specifically for how powerful we want the characters to be. The lowest level is going to be kind of like an indie movie or web series, going up to like movie of the week or syndication, all the way to major motion picture or prime time, or like blockbuster or major cable. I don't know if we need to go blockbuster major cable for this one.
No.
That feels like overkill. We
Yeah,
don't have that kind of special effects budget.
Yeah, this is a step above indie.
Okay.
I'd probably stick for
movie of the week kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, movie of the week would probably keep it where we want to, especially if we're dealing with a fixed length story.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I always lean toward indie budget, schlock budget.
Okay. That makes sense. While I'm taking some notes here, why don't you tell folks about your experience on the Troma film set?
I was fortunate enough to be what started out as an extra and ended up being the Lon Chaney of a new Troma movie coming out called Divide and Conquer, starring a bunch of local San Francisco people, being spearheaded by a local model, Mercedes the Muse. And they called me in for one, and this is during the pandemic, so I have to film separated from people. And they were having problems getting people in, and I kept showing up, and they kept calling me back. So we did a count. I'm in the movie like 6 times as this or that extra.
Nice.
And for anyone who's seen a Troma movie, it's going to be in bad taste. But it's delightfully so.
Yeah. But being in bad taste is pretty much a hallmark of any Troma film.
Yeah.
We're talking like massive, like H.R. Geiger-esque genitalia popping up on screen. It's a little frightening. I think it gave me nightmares more than Geiger stuff did. Let's be real.
But no, I was an early fan of the Troma films, Nukem High, Toxic Avenger, that sort of thing. The idea of it's horror, but it's so cheeseball you wouldn't ever really be afraid of it.
For sure, yeah.
And I think that's sort of a good hallmark of, again, I keep coming back to Gothic comedy of here's this thing you should absolutely be scared of, and you're either making jokes in its face or you're working your way around that fear somehow. Gallows humor is definitely a thing.
Absolutely. Red Spider in the chat basically called out their favorite Troma movie being Tromeo and Juliet.
Good pick.
Good pick. Terrifying pick, but good pick.
My personal favorite is still Poultrygeist, but that's me. Yeah, Troma just started their own streaming service, and it's absolutely worth at least the 1 month preview to see the kind of goofball crap they've produced over the course of the last 40 years.
So I've put down the budget information right now. So that's going to be a movie of the week. So in terms of MORRA, what that means specifically is for character creation, you're going to have 8 points specifically to spend among 4 attributes. Now, when you're starting out with a character, it doesn't matter what budget it is. You'll have 1 point you put in each attribute. One is body, one is heart, one is mind, one is soul. So you'll start out with 1, and then you'll have 8 more to add to that. So it'll keep the power level relatively low, which is actually really good for kind of the characters that we want to see around the table. Specifically, folks who are still kind of figuring out what the heck they want to do. They're not necessarily high powered, and some of them may not necessarily be very smart. But they do have at least a little bit to work with. They
Right.
have an everyman quality, but at the same time, there's just that little bit extra. Even
Mhm.
with the various powers and everything that they're working with, even if it's something that they've had for a while, they're still relatable as people, and I'm really digging that.
And I think one of the hallmarks of like modern Gothic media is definitely low power. You are
Mm-hmm.
in the face of something in the world. You can't beat it. You can't change it, or rather, you can't change it. You've been stuck with it, and if you had sufficient power, there wouldn't be any real challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with that those overwhelming odds is definitely a part, and
Mm-hmm.
it leads to some good role playing and some good monologuing.
Mhm.
For sure, yeah. So our next step here is going to be archetypes. So
Oh, this is the fun
this is the
part.
fun part,
Yes.
yeah. So archetypes in the MORRA setting are basically they kind of are a rough analog to like your class system in D&D, or playbooks in Powered by the Apocalypse games, stuff like that. So I think, oh, Wiggles. So I think we have a couple of things that we could potentially play with. I mean, obviously we've called that one like as a medium. We can absolutely do that.
We could do a created, someone who's been experimented on, like a Frankenstein or an Edward Scissorhands.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be cool.
I'm gonna go ahead and call it a test subject, if only because
Ooh.
I don't want to go too deep into some of the things that Chronicles of Darkness has already covered.
Okay.
So test subject. Um,
How about a scientist style character who's able to work on some of the weird stuff we've
mhm.
gotten, but with none of the budget of the company town. Call him a stitcher.
I like it.
They make the test subjects.
They make they make things out of parts to help battle our big overwhelming evil.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't have the budget. It's all low budget. They have indie
Mm-hmm.
budget science.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it might be cool to have a couple different versions of psychic. Like it
Mm-hmm.
might be cool to have an empath. It might be
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
cool to have a medium. It might be cool to have like a telekinetic or pyrokinetic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
For sure.
Whether
And
it's
I
an emotional or physical psychic, or maybe some people, perhaps even a psychic who doesn't take things in but can only expel things.
Yeah, like we could also tie them to each of the stats. So like a
Yeah.
body psychic would be the person who can only expel things. So like they will set you on fire.
Yeah.
Um and then, the heart psychic would be the person who
an emotional
very
manipulation kind of
empathic.
things.
Yeah, empathy, which they can use for either good or ill.
Mm-hmm.
Um and then mind would be probably like a mind reader,
Hmm.
um
So like
possibly
a
like a
telepath.
little bit, yeah, a little bit of telekinesis. And then soul, I think, would be the medium, the person who can see and speak, interact with the dead.
Mm-hmm.
I love that breakdown.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll probably want to come up with different names for it as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is
But this is absolutely just the brainstorming piece of it, because we're doing the brainstorming stuff here on screen with you. But as far as the actual, 8 to 12,000 word count that could potentially go into this, we're not going to make you sit through that. That's painful. Um,
yeah.
I can maybe call the medium, maybe call them channelers,
Possibly.
because not only can they communicate with the dead, maybe again, if you're dealing with some of that mad science aspect, maybe you need a medium to grab a ghost and shove it into a container.
Okay.
and that could be a really traumatic experience for them.
That's possible.
And
Ferret wranglers.
then for our players who want to play someone who's like a member of the town who hasn't been exposed to getting any powers yet, or at all, we could have them be like a townie, or what's a good name that's fun but doesn't like scream this is someone who's boring, because they're not going to be boring. They're going to have qualities that make them a valuable member of a team.
A Stepford.
No.
I think like
I'm vetoing that right now.
Sorry.
Lodestone, guiding star.
Yeah,
I mean, I almost want to do like if there's a way to do aunt or uncle, because I'm thinking of Supernatural, and for a long time they had that friend of their dad's whose name I'm totally blanking on.
Bobby Singer.
Bobby, yeah, Uncle Bobby.
Damn it, Bobby.
Yeah, like the Uncle Bobby. Or referring back to Lost Souls, one of the main characters is the guy who owns the nightclub.
Yep.
And he was like, I just want to give these kids a safe place to be themselves.
That's exactly where I was kind of going when I suggested bartenders and architect. That was immediately who I was thinking of. I need to go read that book now.
So what if we just cut the bar off and make it tender is the name of the, like someone who tends.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
That's probably better than what I was thinking. I was actually thinking about calling them diurnals.
If we were going with a vampire story, then yes, absolutely. But yeah, so they're just plain old humans who are at least in on it.
And tenders can be a double entendre. You know, they tend to the world, but they also have no power, so they're tender and squishy.
Yeah, I like that.
I was actually thinking about suggesting a quality called chicken. Specifically that they run at the sight of danger.
We should give them a quality that makes it so that they're more powerful when they help. They're like the other characters. Like maybe they're they're a buffer in some way for the other characters, and like maybe either it's emotional support or they're actively like laying down suppressing fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think an ability to remove consequences.
Yeah, there's
They're
actually
a
there's a lot of really great stuff built into some of the general qualities already, and we can either kind of fill in some of those gaps or even just have them as suggested qualities for this character type.
Yeah, or give them a discount. You know, for most people it's 4 points. For this character, it's 3.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. Or maybe some kind of, sorry, I lost the words for a minute.
So Dante, because you are a DJ at goth clubs, are you a goth tender? You tend the goths?
I'm more consider a goth wrangler.
Yeah. Goth herder.
Goth herder.
Hey, you might think that's pretentious, but you haven't seen how powerful it is when you can change the entire rhythm of how people are moving with one flip of a switch if you do it right.
I think a trip to the Bay Area is in store for me and my partner, and we'll come and dance at your club.
I need to get a club night again.
Yeah, well, things are starting to open up. There's a lot of venues there. There were goth nights that just don't exist anymore, or cool concert venues. I believe Dante and I are still kind of reeling from the fact that Slim's is no longer a venue.
Yeah. Grumble, 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 thud.
Yeah. It's definitely been rough throughout the pandemic, which means as y'all go back out to clubs and going out for dinner and everything, tip your service staff. Tip them aggressively. They have not stopped working through all of this. Even though we've all been staying home, holy crap. Definitely make sure you're treating them well, because they've been at it this whole time.
Oh yeah.
Matthew, if you're out here, it may end up being a backyard gothic you.
I'm
okay with that.
Yeah, no, like just fair warning to your husband. it doesn't get very warm here. Get him a sweater.
He used to live in the Bay Area, so
Okay.
that's why he moved here to the desert.
Okay, so he knows what he's getting into. Okay,
Hmm.
that's important.
But to wheel it back, yeah, I definitely like the idea of tenders.
Mm-hmm.
Some sort of game effect element to why you would want to have them around.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I mean,
We want to make it something that players want in their party, and B, something that players want to play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
ooh,
I'm all down for being like the bartender in the goth club, and
Mm-hmm.
that actually, like when you were talking about that, I'm like, I want to play that character.
That's frequently the kind of character that I've played in other games. Remind me to tell you about the story of Lizzie McCrory sometime. Whoo!
I mean,
That one is a big one. Yeah. But yeah, the bartender can absolutely be a really interesting story because they're the ones who see all this stuff day in and day out. They have almost like a 10,000-foot view compared to other people.
and
yeah.
and everyone comes to the bartender with their troubles.
Mm-hmm. Now,
I think a cool quality, because we could also sort of lean into like a grandma archetype.
oh yeah.
Uh, a cool quality would be to give them like a drink mixing. So like it could be a cocktail, it could be a cup of tea, whatever it is comforting and soothing.
I
Have a
love it.
drink.
Yeah, and that could be a way to either
Remove heart
remove
consequences.
consequences,
Yeah.
yeah, or guard against them. So, like, you're about to break into the facility, you stop by grandma's house, drink your tea, and it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like a shield.
Yeah. Or, basically, if you drink this, the next time you take a heart consequence, reduce it by one or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly.
So one of the things that I've been like thinking about as we've been brainstorming is like if this was something that we were LARPing at an event, and the absolute striking like fear that you would give to your players if you knock someone out of play when they went to the facility, and then when they come back to play, they're wearing like a button-up shirt, khaki pants. They're no longer, gothed out,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just standing there smiling and saying, "You should come to the facility. I had a wonderful time." But
Tahiti's
then
a magical place.
our our
God damn it, Dante.
our tenders, maybe their 3-point quality is that they can with like an empathy, they or and the empath are maybe able to counteract the brainwashing.
Yeah.
That's possible. Another idea I had for another potential archetype is a former company man that got
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah.
Something I've wanted to play with in specifically some sort of dark
Downsized.
gothic.
That's what I want to call
Yeah,
it. The downsized.
the basically any sort of gothic or hidden supernatural kind of setting is our PCs have some sort of curse of Cassandra. The idea of you see what's going on and no one believes you for whatever reason. They
Mm-hmm.
can't. They won't.
Absolutely.
I like that. That would be really cool general quality for this genre, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. There should be no if in terms of any sort of supernatural or specifically a gothic supernatural setting, there should be no advantage without a drawback. None whatsoever. Whatever
Mm-hmm.
advantage you pick should have a downside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is actually built into a lot of qualities within MORRA, especially the attractive quality. It's 4 points. It's a pricey one, and uh, get a decent bonus out of it. At the same time, it also means that you're more easily recognizable. So it's definitely kind of got that double-edged sword. Um,
Yeah, there should be no single-edged swords among our qualities.
mhm.
Again, if you
Yeah,
had advantages in power, you would not have this problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like Cassandra Complex could potentially be a twist on the existing quality Sixth Sense, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure how yet.
Going back to the archetypes, I think it might be cool to have a witch, just because like every goth teenager, girl had her experience with Wicca.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think probably let's go ahead and dial it back real quick because there's some other things that we need to kind of determine about this. Is some of the there's a bunch of levers we can pull specifically in the background of the genre, specifically the magic level. Is there magic? If so, where's it come from, and how much is there?
It would be. I feel like it would have to be low magic or at least hidden magic.
Yeah.
I think it would probably fall more in the realm of like psychic and psionic at most.
Yeah, that's fair.
Again, if you get into earth-shaking magic, why do you have this problem?
Right.
And then you get into the when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail problem as well.
Or so we could have a witch archetype who like cannot actually access any of the official schools of magic. They just have a couple qualities that let them replicate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the wild talent quality, I believe. It's a 4-pointer, basically where you have some sort of ability that replicates one of the schools of magic. That could
Yeah.
potentially be, their 1-pointer. It's like you have,
Yeah.
it's like you got like some sort of, you've got some low level ability. It's not just chanting and candles for you.
Yeah. If we had any, again, medium tier physical magic, I would want that the double-edged sword of that to be it has some sort of effect on the tenders. Like I would almost call that drawback torches and pitchforks.
Possibly. We'd have to we'd have to toy with it a little bit. The weight.
Yeah.
Oh, I got an alert. Stacy Gone Rogue is now following. Thank you. And hi,
Welcome.
Uncle Mel. Oh, and yeah, so we've got a few visitors in the stream. Yeah.
Hello, visitors.
Yes.
Hello there.
You know what that does to me. Anyway.
Put the speaker lower.
No, let's not. Let's not.
Sorry.
Anyway, so I think probably actually this could be a setting where we really don't have magic as we know it, and then that wild talent is potentially really the only way to access it. That also leaves the potential for, if we end up having that scope creep, it's something that we could potentially introduce later on with the actual origin of magic showing up in the setting actually happening in play.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I mean, like also to contradict what I just put forward, it might actually be really fun for this to be low magic, no magic, and everything comes from all the psionic and the psychic stuff.
And we can cut out certain schools from the setting that are that might not feel right or might overshadow our psionic characters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And enchantments right out.
Yeah.
So there are specific set schools of magic within MORRA. And I think as we kind of dig in deeper and I pull up additional PDFs on my screen here to kind of feel like, okay, this, and this, and we can figure out specifically what schools of magic are available.
I've been doing the same thing.
I feel like
Go ahead.
I feel like if you're going to reveal more severe types of magic within the storyline, again, my brain's going to different forms of media, so I'm going to use a lot of movie references to do that. But I feel like it should be a carry thing. Any magic you have should be a bomb. It doesn't differentiate. It is a natural force. It's the third act of carry.
Oh yeah.
You can pull this out.
Yeah,
but there's no leash.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are definitely ways that we can kind of there's definitely ways we can reflect that within the setting. And I definitely like that idea. Let me go ahead and make a note of that. Magic always has a major loss. It is hard to control. primarily through wild talent quality. And I figure for the witch, we could basically have, you can have access to effects that are in this one school of magic. This replaces wild talent for you. And
Yeah.
you can't take wild talent again. Yeah. All right. So tech level. I think we probably want to stick with more modern tech.
Yeah,
Or
I
maybe
think
we want to potentially dial it back a little bit.
I think modern tech and whatever they're doing at the secret research facility is +1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or I don't know. I always want to go 10 to 20 years back on my tech, mostly because it's familiar, but still
Mm-hmm.
more limited than what our players are likely used to.
I mean, it would be cool to like insist on like a 90s, like 80s, 90s, because that was also one of the high points of the development of goth culture.
For
And the
sure.
costuming would be awesome.
Yes.
There's a
My-
reason Cybergoth is still popular.
My only concern is at that point we do want to differentiate ourselves a little bit from Stranger Things.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But,
So I think I do like the idea of having modern tech with just shitty reception.
you could
Because
also
we are in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
There's one
Yeah.
cell tower.
Yeah.
Mhm. And
Like
maybe
nobody can really afford this nice smartphones, so
and the psychic energies in the area just kind of disrupt stuff sometimes.
I like
there
that too.
there is not 5Gs in Goth.
I hate you so goddamn much. No, I don't. I say this every day to him, and yet we have known each other for 13 years now.
That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Years. Yeah.
The again, are we specifically sticking with Earth as we know it? Because if we switch,
That's a very good question.
because it could be, hey, we are 21st century, we are here and now, but tech changed slightly. Tech is more organic, it's more horrifying. Technology is squishy and gross.
I mean, it might also be cool if there's just like a lot of surveillance, like
Yeah.
a lot.
Yes, surveillance. I love it.
Something not to go back to the Geiger thing that HedgieCleric had mentioned there, but I always loved like how in a lot of the later Alien films, specifically Alien 3, we have wonderful tech and it's all wet for some reason. Everything is squishy and damp. The aesthetic is quite literally dripping. And it gives everything that weird sort of organic feel even when it's cold metal. But yeah, the high tech dystopia is definitely a thing. You are being watched because you know something.
Mhm.
You know some secret you should not know.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it also puts the danger of if you start like lifting objects with your telekinesis in the middle of town, that's going to have a consequence.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Torches, pitchforks.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
That could definitely be a theme that we potentially play on as we continue to develop the story Bible, which is what we're doing right now. So, sets. I think we've already established a couple of sets that we want to have. So specifically, the friendly bar as opposed to the unfriendly bar. The facility itself.
Maybe a college. Maybe it's a college
Yeah.
town.
Yeah, I was about to suggest a school too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shades of Miskatonic there.
I would want to keep it the school kind of low level, like maybe a community college.
Yeah.
And
Trade school.
basically, yeah.
Yeah, and it pipes right into that facility because it's a company town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a community college, If people want to get more, they have to basically leave town, and usually
Yeah.
that's where some of the uh, more well embedded offices of this company are located. Basically, they can snatch you up pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I also like the idea of there being like an abandoned mine or some sort of place where like this is how the town used to prosper and then the mine ran out or
Mm-hmm.
people are moving away from coal and so
Mm-hmm.
it's not really operational anywhere anymore,
Okay.
but
So
you know uh
some sort of industry that was at one point abandoned. How do we want to treat
yeah, like
that?
a
Like, we could potentially do a mining operation. We could potentially do manufacturing because an abandoned factory could potentially
yeah.
have some impact.
You
Oh
have
Um,
yeah.
you have the killing fields where once there were lush verdant crops, the soil has died. So you have this big open space in the dark. No street
Oh,
lights, no roads, no reception.
mhm.
And it's the very physical embodiment of what this town used to have.
uh, I really like that. That was
I
a
am
really
stealing
evocative
that outright.
description.
Well, actually, I'm not stealing that outright. This is a collaborative environment.
On that note, we definitely want to have a cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. I've seen some I've literally seen some company cemeteries plopped right in the middle of decently large towns, especially when you get into the Chicago and the outlying areas.
Mm-hmm.
Like you that's something you can do in an urban setting as
Mm-hmm.
well, especially if a city grew up real fast. There's little rail worker cemeteries floating throughout the cities. So, I mean, if you did end up going
Mm-hmm.
into urban settings, that stuff is still there.
For sure, yeah. Um,
I think we should also have like the mayor's house or the CEO's house that's very very nice mansion, aesthetically
mm-hmm.
pleasing mansion. It screams money, but there's a lot of secrets here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call it privilege house for now.
Yeah.
Because it's entirely possible the way we build our setting. It's a question of like the mayor and the basically the top individual for the company in town. They could be the same person. They could be two different people. They could be working hand in hand with each other, or potentially even at odds at this point. We could do a
Yeah.
lot. We could do a lot with that, and either with the conflict or cahoots, however we want to go
Hmm.
with it. But I'm gonna call it
If we
privilege house for now.
Yeah.
if we have them separate, we could even have the potential of like maybe one of the games is set around maybe trying to manipulate getting someone in office who is against the facility.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when
Yeah.
our players who are more politically minded,
Mm-hmm.
who like that sort of cloak and dagger intrigue,
Mm-hmm.
that could be something.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, I'm mostly thinking of this place as like it's the villain lair. It's where the antagonist lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So,
Sure. And this actually segues very nicely into the uh, next part of our exercise here, which is the monsters and mayhem. What sort of threats are characters facing?
uh
Obviously, there's the very real human threats of people
Mm-hmm.
who are quote unquote defending the system.
Hmm.
we can call them suits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot less gender term. I like that. So we got suits. We got regular people just trying to live their lives.
Something that would be an interesting threat to psychics would be maybe a robot. Because it wouldn't be something that they could peer into the mind of.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that they would have to physically rally against, but it wouldn't be like something that they might encounter all the time. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's something that they're trying to stop being built.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest a slightly broader scope of that is, uh, other uh, projects coming out of the facility.
Right.
Yeah.
antagonistic text subjects, and experiments.
Which
So
puts our
this one,
characters.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
so this one is going to be a little fraught. And I'm thinking of something like a pill pusher, like someone who really wants the characters to get on psychiatric meds that will suppress their psychic abilities. Like it is fraught because like a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people are on meds and
Mm-hmm.
the meds are good for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be difficult to nail, okay, this but bad guy.
Yeah, and it's also entirely possible that if we have somebody who is a psychiatrist in town who thinks that these are just folks who just are in dire need of mental health, it could be
Yeah.
coming from a really good place. And it's entirely possible that this mental health professional has no idea that the drugs that are coming into this town could potentially suppress these abilities.
Right.
Well meaning mental health professional.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
That could be a variety of suit, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Well, at that point, I think we would have as somebody who's more explicitly aligned with
Okay.
our big corporate threat.
the it's one of those things. A lot of weirdly enough, a lot of the good examples I'm thinking of are ones that specifically demonize the mental health industry.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So it's I don't want to nail that down hard, but there is some good examples of horrific things coming out of that sector of society. So it's oh, that's a double-edged sword. I'm not sure if I want to touch that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
Well,
I
I'm
mean, I
I'm
easily could have
mostly
put down
thinking
rednecks, and
Yeah.
that could have been a thing. But if you take a look at, where rednecks actually come from, they're pretty much going to be anti-establishment all the way through. Now we just need to tell modern rednecks that that's the case and get them to get it.
so I'm mostly thinking like with this sort of like archetype, the well-meaning doctor of like is someone who sees non-conformity in someone as a problem to be solved.
Oh, that hit me where I live, Rachel. Oh.
You obviously
Ow.
you
I'm
obviously
sorry, I did not mean to cause you pain.
you obviously have issues with your father. We should just talk. It'll be okay.
Yeah,
well,
and just like, you'd be so much
Pineapple!
prettier
Pineapple!
if you washed the dye out of your hair and try this nice pink lip gloss.
You should wear a dress more often.
Yeah.
what if we differentiate between actual mental health providers who are beneficial
Mm-hmm.
and like conversion therapy camps
Yeah.
that are trying to take away your individuality? So we're actually making a statement between mental health good and
Mm-hmm.
conversion and self-identity
Yeah.
suppression bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I,
And
I
we
think
make
those would
our
be
Pharmas.
yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
pharmas is good.
No, pharmas. PHARMAS.
Yeah, and we could
Pharmas.
just like make a director's note to the extent of what Matt just said. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like trained therapists and psychiatric medication has helped a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
lead much happier and healthier lives. But then you also have the people who use it for
Mm-hmm.
bad,
Yeah.
and those
Yeah.
are the enemies.
So I went
and
ahead and put down a note, sinister demagogues like conversion therapy evangelists, etc. And I think that'll
Yeah,
probably kind of cover it in a less problematic way. And then as we kind of
yeah,
start diving a little bit more into what the text is going to look like, we can definitely dive in a little bit more there.
and
Um,
we can create a good character who is a mental health professional who is supportive of the player characters.
Hmm.
Maybe even they're an empath or a telepath themselves.
mhm.
Maybe in like a Professor X type role where he's a mentor or she's a mentor.
That's entirely
Uh,
possible. It could also make a really good sub concept for a tender.
yeah.
I like it.
hmm
I'm really, I really liking what we put together. I think it's got some legs.
Yeah.
Um,
Call them truth seekers. They see that you're being straight with them, and they help you figure out when you're lying, even to yourself.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ow. Hurt me where I live again.
Good fiction always should.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, plot threads. We've already kind of got like the main one, which is, cast versus mental health facility. Oh, I didn't catch the notification quick enough because I am literally buried in Windows.
Undead Smiles made a good point in chat. Doc Samson being a good example of a beneficial mental health character.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I like the, as a gay guy, I like the idea of like having this conversion camp be something that we strive to fight against.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I personally would love to like rush into a conversion camp and save a bunch of kids from being brainwashed. Like
Mm-hmm.
that'd be fun for me.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely a really good way to kind of play on that power fantasy. Like, I'm down.
Hmm.
Like, I'd play that. So we've got general cast versus suits, conversion camps. Um, I honestly like the idea of having an old family in town who's like old money, old power, line of these psychics all the way down to the beginning. They've always lived in this town and it is in their blood.
Yeah.
So like antagonistic psychics.
Or even, even have them be, potentially like a factional player characters. Like
Oh.
that's one way we could do it.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we could potentially have, folks who are, part of that family and are kind of, but they have a very strict way on how they use what they have. And, obviously the old family with lots of secrets and skeletons in the closet and people trying to break away from that. That is a classic trope. We can
Oh yeah.
absolutely build on that. I'm going to go ahead and make a note in the story Bible. Old family of psychics with money and power, but they're not tied to the company. They may actually be. I feel like they could potentially be someone that could play either as an antagonist or as a support. Um, the way it's kind of coming in my head is specifically this family could have been very much against um, this particular company moving in and changing the industry involved because it basically took money away from them. And then but they've lived long enough to see that this other their adversary basically in decline. Um but they've got their own powers and like they will take any opportunity that they can to stick it to these assholes, but you're not one of them and thus you're therefore inferior.
Mm.
That could be especially interesting to play with when you're dealing with potential themes of prejudice, because they could take a look at some of the various folks who've actually come out of various experiments from the facility and just look down and was like, no, you weren't born with it. You
Yeah.
have no idea what you're doing, and you will never learn. You will never have it part of your existence like we will.
Think about in recent years, for those of us who are Gen X enough to or old enough to remember things like, you know, like cult standoffs with the authorities.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, you have this chaotic faction over here who's like, we know better. If you're not one of us, you're against us. And over here, you have this very rigid, hierarchical, oppressive faction that's, yes, they might help you deal with the chaotic faction, but they're not going to help you either. And in the middle are these people who just want to live with life with the powers and the things that they have,
Indeed.
and maybe make the world a little bit better than when they came into town.
For sure, yeah. That sounds great. I like that idea. It's we definitely have a lot of things that we could potentially play with here, and I definitely like it. Um, let's see here. What's some other things that we could potentially throw in as potential plot threads. I mean, obviously, some of just standard small town drama would work really well. Like some like, oh my god, Billy Joe's cheating on his wife. But the psychics figure out where he was that night, where people think they know what happened, and he was in fact cheating on his wife. It's something else completely different, but they have no way to prove it. So stuff like that.
Murder mysteries are always good for gothic settings. Also, maybe something got out of the facility, something escaped, and only these psychic goth kids can track it down and fix it.
Right.
How about something the company is doing is quite literally hurting the people in town. Their water's poisoned. They're being exposed to radiation, whatever. But they believe in the company so much they can't even admit something's wrong.
Another thing that might be interesting is the exploration of dreams and the dreamscape, and maybe even like being able to use that as a doorway into another realm. It gets into a far more fantastic space, but it plays into the psionic abilities of our characters.
I really like anything having to do with like dreaming and dream realms. So I'm definitely in favor of this.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of, we could definitely play with that a little bit, especially as far as like some of the cosmology is concerned. I do like keeping it a little bit more kind of internally focused on ways that your own mind could fuck you up. So you have a like, and how a lot of these powers can potentially do a lot to your thought patterns and obviously disrupt your dreams, etc. And we could definitely play with some different qualities on that too.
Yeah, or like we could do mindscape instead of a dreamscape, maybe.
Yeah.
So like instead of like accessing like the entire realm of everything that everyone has ever dreamed, you're restricted to going into like certain people's heads under very specific circumstances.
I believe we just called out an F-bomb penalty, and I think that was my fault.
I haven't used mine yet.
You will! Oh, you will! Thank you, Red Spider, for keeping us honest. For that, wow. I will set aside $5 to go to the Trevor Project. See, this is what happens when I have my swear jar. This is the shit that'll happen. All right. So I think we definitely have a lot of really good ideas here, and but we don't have a name. That's always the hardest part, which is why I always leave it for last.
Oh. I mean, like fun goth terms, we've got like shadows, we've got mystery, we've got depths.
Maybe.
I mean, so we could do one night in whatever we decide to name our town. It's like one night in Centralia. Steal from a different genre.
Yeah.
Scarecrows, shadows, and strawmen.
Maybe. It has a good ring to it. I don't know if it's right for this, but it has a good ring to it.
I'm trying to think of something that alludes to the psychic nature of everything we've come up with.
How about Nightmares in Suburbia, or the name of our town, like Nightmares in Pleasantville? And then you could have like that dichotomy of like nightmare and then like a pleasant sounding town name.
You want to allude to the psychic aspect, huh?
Yeah.
Dreams and Destitution.
That's a little too close to Dreams and Desolation, which is a game that Rachel and I have run.
Oh, okay, never mind.
For By Night Studios back in the day. At least I helped run it at a couple of different events.
Dark Dreams Downtown.
If it was a more of an urban setting, that would be lovely.
What are some good synonyms for like sight and perception?
Hold on.
Vision.
I like vision.
Lost in Longview.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Longview with a couple of different layers to it. Not only, Longview being a good town name, but also the kind of far sight one might have with being a psychic or potentially being able to predict the future, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. I like Lost in Longview.
Sweet. And this is a good working title. If we decide later on as we're working on it that we want to change it, that will absolutely happen. Like my one of the things that I learned specifically with working through the Mighty Narwhal folks is best idea wins. Like we absolutely all pitch in, we make it a good idea together, we feed on each other's energy, we make sure that
Mm-hmm.
everybody's voice is heard, we make it work, and I like what we have here. So, Lost in Longview, intended to be a anthology series of probably motion pictures. Target audience, it's gonna be goths, teens, kind of that 18 to 45 market for sure, especially the 90s nostalgia seekers. It's gonna be rated PG-13. Some disturbing topics. Um, there won't be any direct nudity or gore on screen, but there will definitely be some foul language and only one F-bomb. And it takes place in a small town that had some industry in it, but it was superseded by another company, and that other company has some clandestine operations. But even they're seeing a decline. And some of the experiments that they're coming up with, specifically around the spooky nature of the town in and of itself, has netted some interesting results. Successes are rare, but that's where the cast members come in. It's kind of got that movie of the week budget, so it's not. So the special effects are going to be kind of kept to a minimum.
I do feel like this is leaning itself more toward psychological horror than physiological horror, but I mean, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of, especially with the PG-13 rating, we don't necessarily have a lot of the gore involved. And we have a bunch of different archetypes. We've got different types of psychic depending on the attribute involved, which names TBD. A witch, which has some unexplained mystical power that is totally not magic. Kind of playing into some of the older themes of power from an unknown source. A stitcher, who is specifically someone who can provide the specialized care that some of these psychics will need because of the way the experiments have effed them up. Tenders, who are humans who are at least in on what happened and are supportive. And the downsized, which are former company employees who have gotten out somehow. And the company hasn't decided to get them out of the picture yet. There's definitely going to be some inherent danger in that archetype. Skill adjustments, I think we can play with a little bit more in detail later on. I don't think there are going to be that many. Just as a general note, for MORRA, having an attribute or a skill at 5 is generally considered the human peak without any some sort of supernatural assistance. We may want to consider having some of the enhanced qualities for certain attributes at a lower cost, but we can toy with some of those ideas a little bit more off screen, because if we try to argue that out now, we will literally be here until midnight, and I have a stream to raid in 20 minutes. And then we've kind of started playing with some of the different archetype qualities and some of the genre qualities, like for tenders, pouring them a drink to help kind of mitigate heart consequences in some way. And so, roughly modern tech, no to low magic with a very few exceptions, but, obviously psychic powers and telekinesis, etc. With places like, your friendly bar, the facility where a lot of this research is taking place. There's a community college in town, an abandoned mine or factory from what the company town used to be. That the killing field, which I've noted as this dead soil, dead air, the cemetery, and privilege house for the mayor or company executive who's overseeing operations in town. And of course, there's the old money family in town who've had these powers forever. And I think I'm really happy with what we've put together here because we've got a lot of really good plot threads. There's a lot of places we can pull from, and it's really exciting. I think this has some legs. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to pop this up in a shared Google Drive for all of us and start kind of putting together an outline of various things to write up. And then we can talk a little bit later off screen about how we want to divvy that up and what it's going to look like for submission. Because for the folks who are on the chat now, Mighty Narwhal is actually doing something really cool with how they handle genres. All the intellectual property around the genre itself belongs to the people who created it. So that would be all four of us here on the screen today.
Nice.
Mighty Narwhal basically leases the right to publish the genre. So if we wanted to write like a book or a movie script or a graphic novel or other materials, what have you, based around this world and this setting, we would be able to do so because it's ours. And any money that we would make from selling this particular genre of MORRA would go directly to us. Isn't that nice? You like getting paid?
Very cool.
Yeah.
I like getting paid.
I like getting paid too. Who doesn't like getting paid? But yeah, I think we have I'd Lost in Longview. Keep an eye out for it. I think once we actually have some things fleshed out, I know I'm probably going to want to run like a couple of sessions here on my own channel once we have something a little bit more in place. And I will be casting for that, but I have no idea when. So don't DM me going, I want in on this. But yeah, I think that actually covers most of what we wanted to do for today, which is why we're here. So with that in mind, I think we can probably wrap it a little early. So let's start going around. Everybody does people can find you on the internet, plug projects you're working on, and things you're looking forward to now that the world is potentially kind of returning to what it was, maybe a little. I'm gonna go ahead and start off with Dante this time because I've been kind of leaving him for last a lot, and I want to make sure that he's right up front.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. You can find me on Twitch at DJ Dante Verde. I'm putting a link in the chat right now. I typically spin on Sunday nights. I'm currently working on my own show for sort of media essays kind of stuff. I'm going to be working on that for Wednesday nights. I was in the Trauma movie Divide and Conquer, which will be coming out in a couple of months. So check out traumanow.com. They'll be streaming it on there or releasing it on DVD or what have you. And yeah, I'll be once I get a Bay Area club night, I'll definitely be posting about that.
Thank you. Rachel, where can we find you on the internet and what else are you working on?
Hey, you can find me pretty much everywhere as Stolen Fires, mostly Twitter and Instagram right now. You can also find me over on Twitch at Vorpal Tales, where we are running at least one RPG a day, sometimes two. I will be there tomorrow at 6 o'clock Pacific, running Vampire the Masquerade Sabbat game, which is a lot of fun. We are also playing Dune Adventures in the Imperium on Monday nights. Turns out I'm the Emperor's stepdaughter,
Oops.
and now we're working for House Harkonnen.
Wait,
Neat.
hold on. You're Harkonnen and you're a stepchild. You're quite literally a redheaded stepchild.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. And our the guy running the game, Maron Recluse, is amazing. Yeah, so that's also Monday at 6 o'clock Pacific. Come check us out.
And Matt.
You can find me on TikTok at Geeky Bear LV. You can also find me on Instagram where I post my LARPing pictures with Totes, not a vampire. And it's vampire because I'm totally not a vampire, guys.
With the Y.
That's you, guys.
Speaking of, you can see me work with our Las Vegas vampire troupe, Desert of Shadows. We will be going to live play, which I'm super looking forward to in July, and we're hoping to do a one-shot Werewolf the Apocalypse game in September. And finally, tonight for the MORRA Cinematic game, we will be doing The Mark of Zorro, The Treasure of Saint Kateri. It will be tonight at 8 p.m. And you can find it here on Twitch at totes_not_a_vampire, VAMPYR.
We'll drop that in the chat here in just a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, and as for me, I am HedgieCleric. I am the host of Craft Services with HedgieCleric every Saturday from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. Pacific, where we talk about game design and make stuff. In this case, we made a game or a genre for a game. Um, um, and actually starting up on a monthly series will be Mystical Rome: Order of the Gorgon, which is also set using the MORRA system, and with a fantastic cast, including just some of the most hilarious role players I've ever seen. It is, I can't gush about it enough. We are literally just trying to nail down the dates for June, and I'm looking forward to that. And next week, I will have some folks around for a new upcoming game called Goblins Grabbed My Dice, where you literally are a goblin at a gaming convention specifically to get dice, because they're the shiny click clack math rocks. Anyway, definitely check out Matt's stream later tonight. But for now, I am going to double check something real quick, because if it is active, I am going to be rating a certain goth DJ who has his set tonight, like I always do. For all of those who are here, who've been here before, you know him, you love him. He is the Living Dead DJ out of Boston, the one, the only DJ Dirge. And now, once I get my computer to load properly, we will absolutely go do that. Creator, there we go. But for now, thank you so much for coming. What should our raid call be, y'all?
I have no idea. Sorry.
Excelsior.
What?
Excelsior.
We got movie sign.
I like that one. We got movie sign. All right. Ready and about to raid now-ish. There we go. And we will see you all soon.